I heard a lot of interesting stories. My father had a country store with a porch on it in front that these guys especially would come in and I would listen to them when I was even 8 or 9 years old, hanging around. They didn't know whether you were listening to them or not, but we'd listen carefully and we learned a lot. And the women would go shopping in the store, and the men would tell tales, and a lot of it it influenced me to make you laugh and also sometimes make you sad, of course.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me on the Gift of Need podcast. I'm Jude DiMeglio Trang, author and observer of human need in society. This podcast seeks to address the overlooked power of human need and how it shapes our behavior, relationships, and society. And it's born from the belief that our needs are not burdens, but opportunities and gifts. My guest today is Charlie Hodges. Hi, Charlie.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about your background, what you did for your livelihood, family, a little bit of that stuff.
Okay. I'm originally from East Tennessee, and I went to the University of Tennessee the first time through the college thing and got a degree in mechanical engineering. Then I went to work in Dallas, Texas, and after that Atlanta, Georgia, before going back to graduate school at the University of Florida and becoming more of a civil engineer, which I practiced in the transportation end of the business for a lot of years in California and here in Arizona, both in Bisbee and Pima County. And I have traveled around different places. I've lived in the West since 1974. Moved from California to California from Gainesville, Florida, to take a job in Fresno, and then 10, 12 years later, wound up here in Tucson, Arizona, with my wife Suzanne, who is an artist, as you know. So that's kind of my short career thing. In the meantime, I've been trying to be a writer for many years, especially after moving up to Mendocino County, California, where artistry and writing and all those creative things was a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, today we're going to be discussing the art of storytelling. And I have to say, Charlie is my favorite teller of stories. And it's not just the content of his stories, which range from little-known bits about rural towns to the background on political personalities, but it's in the telling of them. And I find that regardless of what he might be talking about, he has a fascinating way of saying it. And to me, this is the hallmark of great storytelling. So, Charlie, would you tell us about where you grew up, and did your particular environment and the storytelling influences there play a role in your life and in this gift that you have?
Well, I think it's more hard work than gift in a lot of ways. It takes a heck of a lot of practice, just like music. But the part of the country I grew up in was near Cumberland Gap, and where Kentucky and Tennessee and Virginia come together, and the whole area was really rich with music and stories when I was coming up. And essentially it's where the country music thing started, over around outside of Bristol. And then the Grand Ole Opry started in downtown Knoxville before it actually wound up in Nashville.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
They had these little radio stations that were wonderful. My mother would take us down to Knoxville from our little town in Lone Mountain, Tennessee, near the Norris Lake, and we'd go down and she'd go shopping, and we'd walk around and get her pictures taken and do all these crazy things. And then we would go in and listen to live music going out on the radio, WNOX out of Knoxville, which everybody listened to. So that was a rich environment to become interested in both the music thing and the telling of stories. But at the same time, I have to say that there was an expression there in the area of East Tennessee I grew up, where when somebody would say that so-and-so tells a lot of stories, what they meant a lot of times is they're fibbers.
They're a good liar.
Tell stories. But I had a lot of influence from different directions, and one of them, of course, was, we had to go. My dad was a politician, and for most of from the time I knew, finally, got to know what was up, until he passed away. He was into politics, and he was also a businessman, and so he had to take us to church, because for one thing, if he didn't go, they wouldn't vote for him. So I got a lot of influence from the music end of things and the storytelling end of things, from attending church and singing sessions and things like that. Big influence, actually. I started singing when I was I put together a quartet when I was in high school, and we sang a cappella. And then in church, they would show us how to do the triads and everything with their voices. So that was my rudimentary thing before I actually got into playing guitar and things like that, and mandolin. But from the storytelling end, I heard a lot of interesting stories. My father had a country store with a porch on it in front that these guys especially would come in, and I would listen to them when I was even 8 or 9 years old, hanging around. They didn't know whether you were listening to them or not, but we'd listen carefully, and we learned a lot. And the women would go shopping in the store, and the men would tell tales, and a lot of it it influenced me, make you laugh, and also sometimes make you sad, of course. So I don't know, my earliest experience on actually being interested in literature, let's say, was 5th or 6th grade. I was introduced to Jack London and Call of the Wild, probably the first one I read. And I always had an attraction to the sound of words, and I listened carefully to preachers and how they sounded their words. Some of them didn't sound them very well, actually. But I also got interested in reading the encyclopedia, because that was pretty much, I went to a very poor school, rural school with outdoor toilets, and there wasn't many books around, but they did have encyclopedias. So I would read a lot in the encyclopedias, but when people started pushing books at me, I really got interested in reading. And then when I got into my first round of college, I actually scored pretty high on the placement test for English and math and things like that. And English was my favorite subject, even though I was studying engineering. And I was in the honors English class, so the professor, her name was Higginbotham, I still remember it. She would make us read books that I'd never heard of, or authors I'd never heard of, like Arthur Koestler, for example, Darkness at Noon. He was a Hungarian fellow who grew up around communism and then got sour on it. And that became a famous book. I had no idea who he was or what the book was about, but we had to write about it from the point of view of what is he really saying, and not really write about how he wrote. So that was one of my influences to really think about writing in a different way than I had thought about all through high school.
Yeah, that's like the I've heard an important quality of a great storyteller is the ability to show, don't tell. And that's the ability to connect with others on an emotional level that engages listeners. And it's something I'm not really gifted at. My brain kind of overpowers, I think, my emotions much of the time. And so my default is telling information. And maybe this is why I so appreciate a good story and storyteller, because it's an area of utter lack in my life. Do you think that you naturally see the world in terms of actions and vivid descriptions in that show, don't tell way?
Well, I think that's a pretty good way to put it. One aspect of the writing business, because it's one thing it took me a long time to learn this, but there's a big difference between writing as a mechanism and writing to help your mind arrange its thoughts in better than it would have otherwise. And there's also a great saying that I learned long ago that essentially says some people start writing to show what they know, and other people write to find out what they know. And that has been a big deal with me. And also the other thing you learn along the way is rewriting is absolutely essential. And I remember reading for the first time back in the 80s the original copy of the first book on that Albert Einstein wrote on his original theory. And if you have a rudimentary understanding of algebra and trigonometry, you can follow his mathematics on how he got to that E equals MC squared, based upon some experiments that were done by an Irishman with spinning mirrors reflecting light. Fascinating. And he said that was 1914, I think it was, the very first one. I found a copy of it in the Bisbee Library when Suzanne and I worked for the Bisbee, down in Bisbee for the Cochise County. And he said all along that he wanted to make it as simple as he could, but still keep the meaning correct. And he says, and I always wanted to make it better, but I got to writing these other theories and things. I never got back to that one. So he was practicing that whole thing. I'm writing to help my mind see what I can know or learn or work out. But when you're writing fiction, let's say, that's one thing. When you're writing technical publications, that's another thing. And then when you're writing just an essay or something, a whole nother thing. But essentially, if you're writing fiction, there's got to be a lot of reality in it, or it won't be interesting.
So that's the authenticity thing that is important. Yeah, about with storytelling is that even in fiction, there's got to be a ring of authenticity, right? Or it doesn't resonate with people, because there are certain things like there's gravity. That's a law that we know, sense, feel on the earth, right? And you have to write things that speak to us. That's even if it's fiction, which kind of mind boggles me, because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to create fiction. Like I said, I tend to just see the facts. So I've heard it said that stories are truth in the abstraction. Stories, and I guess fiction in particular, give us a way we can accept the lesson without it feeling like a lesson. And so do you ever tell or write fictional stories, or are most of your stories taken from real life?
I do both and have done both. But at the same time, some of the stories I have now that I hope, I'm not sure, sometime next year there'll be another book of mine out with stories, or possibly the stories become put together in such a way it's can be passed as a novel. But I had some fun in at one time when I was writing about the area that I grew up in, and I made up some characters based upon what little bit I had learned about this particular man who was one of the few black people in the area of around Jonesboro, which is one of the oldest towns, and it is the oldest town in Tennessee, near Bristol. It happened to be a guy that worked with my brother at a power plant there in East Tennessee for a long time. And I later on met a black woman who was married to a friend of mine who was a jazz musician up in New York City, in Brooklyn. And she happened to come from that very area. And so I had some fun with thinking about how it would be to be back in, say, 1950s, 60s, which is where, I was born in 46, and so I was a teenager in the late 50s and early 60s, how it would have been to live there and then move to New York City, and also how it would, how those people who stay behind, like the two parents. And I had a lot of fun with creating these characters based upon essentially some people that I knew, but what I could do with my imagination. And it takes off with you if you give it a little run, a little room to run. But at the same time, it's a little like music, you have to keep it under control.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Well, another quality I enjoy with your storytelling is your delivery. You have just a natural way of using the tone of your voice and the pacing, timing of your words that makes your delivery engaging. Is that something that's just part of who you are, or have you focused on developing that?
I think it's more who I am, and also how I was raised and what I was exposed to in terms of people. I had a very rich environment to draw from. As I said before, just my daddy's store porch. I've got a whole story about that. It's too long to read today, but I won't read that. But just the things you hear, and the characters you see all around you, if you take the time to try to figure out or maybe imagine why they are like they are, you can never figure it out, but you can make some good, you can sort of, satisfy yourself that that's kind of who that person is and how they are. But I always, it's like one of my cousins said to me, Charlie's never met a stranger. She said, because I can talk to people.
Yeah.
And it helps traveling around the world if you can do that too. But it also helps in the sense of writing down what you really feel, other than just trying to write something that looks and sounds good. It has to have all those elements, and storytelling. It was a big thing with the early musicians in my part of the country. Every little country song that had anything that really moved people, it was always a story, and maybe they were too similar. A lot of them are. It wasn't all just about trucks and dogs and things, it was feelings. And there's one of my favorite songs, by the way, from a contemporary guy, my brother knows him, is She Thinks My Tractor's Sexy. You know that song?
I have to say, I've never heard that one, Charlie.
Yeah, look it up. Look it up.
Well, in creating a shared experience is reading your audience and understanding their needs and interests. Is that an important skill? And if so, how do you do that? Like when you're sharing a story in a group setting?
Well, again, you have to be natural to tell a natural story. So that means you can't, like my dad used to have a saying, I don't mean to be bragging or boasting, he would say, but then he'd say something. He'd preface it with that, that I'm still humble. And then he'd tell a story, he was a funny guy, but it was dry humor. But I had a lot of relatives that could sit and talk to you all day about different aspects of their lives and other people's lives that didn't have to really think about it much because it was just naturally who they were. Now, could they sit down and do a piece of literature that somebody in New York City at one of the big presses would say, that's cool, or that's worthy of publication? No, probably not,
But this is this heritage of oral storytelling that you're talking about. And I think that you're a musician, you're a talented musician, and it has to be something in your ear, that your ability to hear, and I think also listening. Obviously, you listened and observed those people on the front porch of the general store, and there's a way in which that I did not grow up with that oral storytelling at all. And as I've gotten older, I've been very interested in it, and whenever I could, I've recorded like my grandfather and my parents and gotten them to tell stories. But I didn't really, I'd hear little stories and stuff, but it wasn't the same. It's like you kind of grew up in that culture of storytelling.
Yes, I did. And one part of that too was around the area I grew up was, the old tribes that had been around that area for a long time. The main was, of course, Cherokee. It's like the old saying was. I had my brothers, one of my brother's former wives passed away now. They were visiting Navajo country out here one time, and so she said something about where she was from, and near the Cherokee Lake there, near my brother's house, and the Navajo woman says, I bet you think you're part Cherokee, don't you? She says, most people who come from there do. And she made her laugh, and she always was told that. Turns out, with the testing that they can do now, and ancestry stuff and DNA stuff and all that, she said, I didn't have a drop of Indian blood in me, but I didn't care because I liked to think it, and it was, I liked their culture, and and a lot of that local way of handing down the oral tradition and the stories. Of course, they had no printed language until the Sequoia developed the Cherokee written language. Both he was from Tennessee originally, I guess, his family, but then he wound up in Oklahoma. But they had a strong, just like all the Native American tribes, they had a strong oral tradition, and that's how they, you could make up things to tell a story in the old days, the Native Americans would, that sounded absolutely fantastic, but I would go, like Spider-Woman and all kinds of different things of the Earth's creation. And I would go, well, I don't know. It's not that much different to me than the myths of the snake and the woman in the Garden of Eden. Things like that,
Right. Is it necessary to insert every little detail or a clearly stated moral in stories, or does that actually weaken the impact? Like, is it important to trust your audience to understand the story's meaning without too many stated conclusions? Like, leave them to ponder this.
Yeah, you don't want to be too obvious because it's boring. And you remember, Oscar Wilde, the great British writer, he said, attributed this great statement. Other people have said it differently, but he always maintained that the secret to being a bore is to tell all you know.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. And so in writing, I always liked, there was 2 or 3 schools of writing that I studied along the way decades ago. There's 2 examples here. Ernest Hemingway was always impressed with Gertrude Stein, and Gertrude Stein was a big advocate of what she called automatic writing. Just let it flow, and sentences that went for 2 or 3 pages. But Hemingway picked up on that and expanded that idea. But then other writers later on, brevity was sort of like poetic brevity was cherished to get right to the point. But at the same time, you've got to expand a little bit on the ideas and the memes that are behind what you're actually trying to tell. It's different from just saying, okay, I'm writing this story now, and how I want it to end is such and such. Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but at the same time, like in a play, if you introduce a pistol in the first act, you better have it used before the third act, because it's a useless piece of information. So same thing with writing fiction or prose as opposed to poetry. You want to have a general framework, but you don't want to know until you're done how it really winds up.
Well, oh gosh, I have so many questions, but Charlie is also a musician and a published poet, and we'll get into some of that a little later probably, but does storytelling play a part in those endeavors with you?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing going way, way back, it's like I had a great writer friend he's passed now, he's Canadian guy who grew up way up in northern Ontario, and his daddy was a semi-pro hockey player, and somehow or another he got out of that environment and wound up in New York City. And so like me, he had all this interesting background from way back, but that's not what he wanted to write about when he was writing poetry. He wanted to write about both people and ideas. And if you go back way back to even Dante and Shakespeare, they wrote stories for sure, and the stories last forever because they're so well done and well written. But they used rhyme to help them remember it. Is what the rhyme was all about. Nothing needs to rhyme, even songs, but it helps to remember them. And poetry went from all rhyming for the longest time until about the 50s and 60s, where those people back at Black Mountain College and outside of Asheville, North Carolina, they helped change it. Charlie Olson was one of them. But the guys like old-timers and more conservative writers like, Robert Frost, for example, he said, writing free verse is like playing tennis without the net. He wouldn't give up the rhyming. But at the same time, Charlie Olson said, you can rhyme without having rhymes at the end. You can do internal rhymes. You can do how the voice goes. And he wrote several really interesting essays about that, and I was a big fan of Olson.
Well, I have read that in order to have stories that resonate with others, they need to convey survival information because it's part of our human condition. And so what is it about telling stories, whether fact-based or fictional, that you think is a gift that fills the needs for others? Do these stories that we relate to on a visceral level hit home because of the needs we have as humans and just how we are trying to make sense of our world?
Well, that's a good way to put it there, really, because that is sort of how people get hooked on reading, and also get hooked on writing, because you are trying to make some sense of the world and your own little world as well, for sure. again, I don't think, I never was an advocate of doing outlines. But some people can write fiction by having an outline and just filling stuff in. I can never do that because to me, it's like taking an adventure and going on a trip. Some people will go to certain places that people love to visit, and they will have a set thing to do, a set number of things to do. Suzanne and I have never traveled quite like that. We may set out to do one thing and we wind up doing two other ones, but at the same time, we get the job done, of the traveling and the learning and all of that. And writing is a bit like that with me. Sometimes you surprise yourself, that what comes out of your mind and you go, I don't know, I don't want to write that down.
Should put that in there. So, well, on the flip side, what is it about telling stories and sharing your talents and gifts that fills a need in your life? How does being a storyteller and writing poetry and stories, what does that do for you as a person?
Well, it helps me again understand to help myself understand myself better, and at the same time, I have a need to express myself, whether it's with writing or music. I just always have, since I can remember. That's why I started singing a cappella when I was like 15 years old, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a need to do it. And that's really what hooks a lot of people. But there are other people who something will trigger them. They will read a specific book, and the whole world will be changed from their perspective of what literature and stories are really about. And it's not just some people read for entertainment. I know a family member. Well, Suzanne's brother-in-law. He always reads. I mean, he actually reads when he's watching television. Seriously. But he reads a bunch of different books for entertainment. So it's easy to read.
Right.
Okay. So there's all kinds of literature, and always have been, and the ones that last, usually they last for a specific reason.
Right.
Right. And
it somehow relates to this human story.
Yes,
that's right, to us.
Yes.
Right. And
spirit.
Just like you said, you have there's something in us that we need to express ourselves. Right. It comes out. Some people are storytellers or musicians. Some people are artists. Some people are builders.
Right.
But we have that. I think it's that creative thing in all of us. And it's not always being a star on a TV show, right? Or in a movie.
Right, right.
I want to say, do you have a story you'd like to share with us to end our time together?
Sure.
Oh, great.
Let's see, this is based upon some true people, real people, and a real community thing. So I think I called it The Importance of Audacity, and when I first finished it. Okay, here we go.
All right.
At the little store in Lonesome Valley where barn bullies traded stolen eggs for cigarettes and snacks, the storekeeper had palsy. And one of his hands often shaked so noticeably people got anxious about it. The wife had her hair done in town at least once a month. Unlike most women in her isolated community, she thought it was a waste of money and time and possibly a sin. She had gray hair, but her favorite hairdresser, 10 miles away in the nearest actual town, periodically treated her aging hair with a chemical solution that made her hair an interesting shade of light blue. The husband often sat on a bench on the front porch of his store and talked with other men, most of them old like him. Carl, you remember when it snowed one time right at the end of June? A white-haired man said one hot summer day. Mr. Phelps thought a minute as his right hand and then his right arm began to noticeably shake, He reached over with his left hand to steady the right, and he replied, "Yeah, I remember. It was 1929, and I was hoping to get my mule hitched up to plow my backer field. It was about the same time banks and the stock market was going all to hell. I thought they were making up stories of strange weather to entertain youngsters. How could it snow in the summer? Maybe their minds were getting confused in old age. But many years later, I saw snow coming out of the sky in the first week of July at a bluegrass and gospel event near the town of Narrows, Virginia, a place similar to towns in East Tennessee. So I remembered that store porch conversation. One of the gospel bands sang a good rendition of On the Wings of a Snow-White Dove right before the snow started falling, and the crowd took it as a good omen, as I heard a few amens in the background. At one time, the owners of that little store about a half a mile from our house had a business license, allowing them to run an operation where they sold beer and hamburgers and hot dogs and various sandwiches in a building out back of the store. Both the store and the beer joint had outside walls that looked like an old barn. Many years of weather and sunshine had already made the walls planks gray and the nail heads rusty. The buildings were set on wooden posts resting on stacks of rocks. The floors were high enough above the ground to allow a curious boy to crawl underneath and explore while listening to various sounds, including conversations coming from the beer joint and the store and the porch. Beer joint had a jukebox that featured country music often played loud enough to be heard by someone walking by on the road. The storekeeper had two special friends who drove nice big cars, one a Cadillac DeVille and the other a Chrysler Imperial. My brothers and I knew not to play around the beer joint, but we could go to the badly lit, poorly stocked, and improperly vented grocery store out of curiosity and to buy tasty snacks. The little clapboard store smelled smuttier than Daddy's store and offered fewer items to buy than in my father's better stocked and better managed rural business. Now, don't be hanging around the beer joint, Mama reminded my older brother and me. You ain't got no reason to hang out with people who could have bad intentions. Granny said to get a perspective registered and maybe have the last word would come in with double warning. Almost everyone in that part of the county suspected the man who drove a big shiny Chrysler might be a successful bootlegger. Some people claimed he gave bribes to the local authorities. Every year in certain months he came to Daddy's store and bought large bags of sugar and quality cornmeal and corn mash and boxes of empty mason jars. The wife's getting ready to cut a bunch of fresh fruit, he would say. Most people figured he was planning to blend the sugar and corn products with water and possibly some barley grain to make a fermented mash that cooked until alcohol vapor made its way into copper tubing and condensed into a clear liquid called moonshine. Everyone called this setup a still, from the word distill, referring to the final condensation process. One day I carried sacks of sugar and cornmeal, boxes of canning jars and paper bags full of groceries out to the bootlegger's Chrysler and carefully placed each item in the car's big trunk. Now you be a good boy and mind your mom and daddy, the whiskey man said, as he pressed a silver quarter in my hand. You could buy a Pepsi and a bag of salted peanuts to pour down a bottleneck and make the cola fizz, and a pack of peanut butter crackers with change left over for cheap candy. Moonshine Man was a sharp dresser and had a nice clean hat and shiny shoes. His hands looked like they rarely did any manual labor. Like most people in the county, I knew to turn around and go the other way if I ever came across a moonshine operation walking in the woods. After walking uphill about a mile from the railroad tracks behind our house, my younger brother Steve roamed around one afternoon looking for ripe blackberries to pick and saw what looked like a whiskey still. The men cooking up the new batch of corn liquor hid behind some thick-leafed bushes, and all of a sudden one said, "Oh, hell, that's just one of them Mullins boys." And they were relieved that my brother was not a government man, and they offered him some of the latest brew, but he's just a boy, so he declined. Some of the men customers at the beer joint showed up with women wearing a lot of makeup and tinted hair teased up big and puffy around powdered faces. I never saw the storekeepers or their beer joint customers at church on Sundays, but they probably had a standing invitation to come because many people in Lonesome Valley felt a duty to be in the business of saving souls from hell.
Oh my goodness, that is wonderful, Charlie. Oh my gosh, you get the feel of that whole place. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Well, we could go on. We could be here and do a whole podcast of stories, but it's time to bring our conversation to a close. Thank you, Charlie, for making the time to be with us today and talk about how the needs we all have for great storytelling can become opportunities for the people gifted in telling stories. And then those stories become gifts and meet the needs of all of us. So, and just bring joy. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me here. And I'd like to put one or two little plugs in here.
Would you please?
I have my book of poems that I published a few years back is called Sirens in Paradise. And I had a couple of blurbs on the back that I like. One of them is from a local poet named William Pitt Root. He's got a lot of, he's been writing a long, long time, and he was the first designated poet laureate of the city of Tucson back in the late 60s, early 70s, I guess. Good man. And he says it's a fine and attractive book from cover to cover. He gets right to the point. He's a man of few words, and what he says, especially his poems, he's a very good writer. The other blurb is from a writer friend out in California who he says, in the spirit of Walt Whitman and Allen Ginsberg, Mr. Hodges uses free verse to describe America. These are poems about all sorts of places across the land, including Carrack's Alley and San Francisco's North Beach. The author has done some hard traveling, and everyone knows that traveling sweats the fat off the brain. I love it. I love it.
Where can people buy Sirens in Paradise, Charlie?
Well, I have a website that's not working right now through the Authors Guild. It will be back up eventually, especially before I get my stories published. And it's just cwhodges.com, but you can't get to it now because some kind of error message. It's a technical difficulty on their part. But the other thing is, can I give out my email?
You know what? I'm going to add the details in the story notes to this podcast so that people can get a hold of you and get that book. And thank you again, Charlie.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Yeah. Okay. The great music you're hearing now was written and performed by Gabe Kubanda at Kubanda Music. You can find him on any streaming service. The engineer is Ray Engineering of 3rd Street Productions in Tucson, Arizona. Please consider following, rating, and sharing this podcast with your friends. And subscribe to my free Substack newsletter. And leave a comment or a review. I would love to hear from you. Bye!